VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Thank you for joining us on Crosstalk on the VCY America Network. And just before we introduce our guest and topic for today, I do want to call attention to a tragedy that unfolded this morning in Minneapolis, Minnesota, as Fox News reported. Minneapolis authorities said at least 2 children are dead and more than a dozen injured after a shooter opened fire during a mass at the Annunciation Catholic School in Minnesota. The attacker, a man who was in his early 20s, dressed in black clothing, targeted them would mark the first week of classes for children that were attending the school. That was said by the police chief. He said, shooting through the windows, he struck children and worshipers that were inside the building, armed with a rifle, shotgun, pistol. It was a deliberate act of violence against innocent children and other people worshiping, saying the sheer cruelty and cowardice of firing into a church full of children is absolutely incomprehensible. 2 young children, ages 8 and 10, were killed as they sat in pews. 17 other people were injured, 14 of them being children. The coward who fired these shots, he said, ultimately took his own life in the rear of the church. Mayor Jacob Fry said there are no words that can capture the horror and evil of this unspeakable act. I was reminded of what the prophet Jeremiah wrote, as recorded in Jeremiah 17:9, that the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? And friends, how badly this world needs Jesus. Now to our guest and topic for today. In this present generation, we have seen the continued thrust that has been pushing socialism on our society. It's happening on so many fronts. You know, on a global level, we heard it said, you will own nothing and be happy. And we have seen in recent years the advancing of the government on the people, giving the persona that the government will meet your every need. We'll provide all your children's meals through government schools. We'll take care of all your health care needs. We'll take care of your transportation. We'll provide you food vouchers. We'll take care of your daycare expenses, and the list goes on. Yeah, we'll provide haircuts and whatever you need. Our current administration is resistant, very resistant to this mantra, but it's ever so present before us. Last week, the Daily Signal ran a column by Star Parker with the headline, Mamdani and Socialism's Appeal, When Will We Ever Learn? It reports on 2 recent polls, Gotham and Siena, on the NYC mayoral race, showing that the Democratic Socialist candidate leading Andrew Cuomo by 18 points one survey, 19 points on the other. And they said that one major factor in Mamdani's successes and support is coming from Gen Z voters, ages 18 to 29. And I had to ask my question, what is the draw of socialism? Why are so many Gen Zers being drawn into the trap of socialism? How is it our society is drawn so easily into this? Joining us today to address this matter, we welcome back William J. Federer. Bill is a nationally known speaker. He's an historian, an author, president of AmeriSearch. He's a speaker on the American Minute Daily broadcast. He has authored numerous books, including America's God and Country Encyclopedia of Quotations, Who is the King in America? And listen to this title, Socialism, The Real History from Plato to Present, How the Deep State Capitalizes on Crises to Consolidate Control. And then also, Silence Equals Consent, The Sin of Omission. Bill, so good to have you back with us here on Crosstalk.
Jim, great to be with you.
So let's talk about this socialism. I mean, you put lots and lots and hours and hours and hours of research into your book on socialism, The Real History from Plato to Present, and how this deep state capitalizes on crises to consolidate control. And Bill, I know you've studied this matter of socialism. It's said to be the dream of an ideal society. It is something that's being pushed by this candidate for New York City mayor. It's being pushed by other candidates in other cities running as well. Democratic socialism we see as being on the rise, even within the Democratic Party itself. What is the draw? What is the lure of socialism, and why are Gen Zers so willing and ready to jump on the bandwagon?
Well, there's 2 ways to get people to give up their freedom: fear and free stuff. And so after the World War II, the Cold War. The communists couldn't defeat America from the outside, so the idea is the inside. And that is where you get everybody in the country dependent. I was reading about catching pigs in Texas, wild pigs. You put a post in the ground and you throw some corn down. The pigs come, eat the corn, and they ignore the post. The next day, there's 2 posts in the ground. You throw the corn down, they eat the corn, ignore the post. Next day, 3 posts, 4 posts. You put them in a semicircle, and then you start putting them into a circle until finally you just have a little opening, and the pigs will squeeze through the opening, begin to eat the corn, and you shut the gate, and you caught yourself some wild pigs. You trap them through dependency. It's the way a drug dealer takes over a neighborhood. He can come in with guns and get everybody in fear, or the drug dealer is so nice he's giving away free drugs until you get hooked. And so this is called the Cloward-Piven strategy. Richard Cloward, Francis Piven, they were Columbia University professors, and they said, you'll never conquer America with tanks. What you have to do is destabilize the economy and get everybody to sign up for welfare. And they'll incrementally give up their freedoms to keep the welfare checks coming. And so this is a tactic. I tell people, imagine if older fish could tell younger fish to stay away from shiny things dangling in the water. But they can't. So every new generation of younger fish see this shiny thing, and it's a hook, and they're caught. Socialism is a shiny thing dangling in the water. Free food, free clothes, free education. Free is the most attractive word in the English language, but there's a hook. You give up control of your life. You surrender, you become dependent, and then the government corrals you and shuts the gate. And all we have to do is look at all of history, and I go all the way back to Plato in 380 BC. He's the first one that talked about everybody owning everything in common. And it sounds good until you think it through. Somebody has to be in the government handing out the common stuff. And they're humans. They're always going to be tempted to give a little extra to their family and friends and hold back from someone they don't like. And before you know it, it gets discretionary. And the saying is, he who holds the purse strings has the power. So whoever is in the government handing out the free stuff, they are in power. And so every attempt at everybody owning everything equally ends up with a deep state bureaucracy passing out favors to their friends and weaponizing the government against their enemies. It happens every time. But if you don't know history, then you're sucked into the trap, just the same way the younger fish will go after that hook.
Yeah, and what's so interesting with this bill, too, at the same time, when people want, we want security and so forth, yet we have, the vilification of law enforcement, of police officers, and we don't want to have a cash bail and just let everybody off. We want to decriminalize so many things. We want to not hold people accountable for misdemeanors. I mean, those are some of the things on the platform of this candidate for New York City mayor. And how is that people are willing to sacrifice even basic security and lawless, we're going to see the escalation of lawlessness just spread throughout New York City.
Yeah, so that's the fear aspect. So you get them dependent, but then another way to get people to give up their freedom is fear. You have to create problems. You have to let the criminals out of jail. Let the criminals roam the streets. Let the crime go up, and then there is this plea for the government to come in and restore order. And this happens enough times, the people are used to the government doing this, and people with bad intent can stay in power, right? So instead of just restoring order and then saying, okay, enough's enough, like Grover Cleveland, when they were doing the railroad strike in 1894, destroying $80 million worth of railroad cars in 27 states. Grover Cleveland sent in 12,000 Army troops to stop these socialist rioters. And then afterwards, Grover Cleveland decided to set aside a day so that workers could have a day off, and he called it Labor Day.
Wow.
And
is there
get into the Labor Day history?
Yeah, and is there a connection between socialism and Labor Day?
Yep, a big connection. So the situation in America during the Revolution is most people had jobs as butcher, baker, candlestick maker, cabinet maker, upholsterer, milliner made clothes, cobbler made shoes, chandler made candles, coopers made barrels, but they were individual type jobs. Then the Industrial Revolution. What was that? So Ireland, what did they burn in their fireplace? They didn't have a lot of trees in Ireland. They burned peat, P-E-A-T, and it came from bogs, like swamps. And it was this mucky black mud that you would pull out, let it dry. They would chop it into square blocks, put it on the back of a wagon, and go around town and sell people these blocks of peat. And they would put it in their fireplace, and there was enough carbon content in there from the decomposing, plants that it burned. But in England, if you let that peat sit underground for maybe a century, it compresses and turns into coal. So in Britain, they burned coal, and they had coal mines. But the problem was the coal mines kept filling up with water. So James Watt, a Scottish inventor, came up with a pump to pump water out of coal mines, and it was with steam. He found out you could push pistons, right? You heat up the air, it expands and pushes the piston up, and then you cool the air, and the piston will go back down. He harnessed this, and it didn't just water out of wells, it turned into a steam engine, and it ran railroads and steamboats and factories. What was the main factory? Textiles, cloth. So if you put the sheep wool under a microscope, it has little barbs, and if you hook them together and pull them, they stick together harder, and it becomes into a thread. And so women would sit there with a pile of sheep sheared hair and turn it into these threads and put it in their spinning wheel, and they would pull it really tight, and then it would wrap it up, and then they would weave in looms. Take a long time to make cloth, and very labor-intensive. But with factories, you could have a mechanical loom that could make entire bolts of cloth really quick. Mm-hmm. So the Industrial Revolution caused the fastest rise in the standard of living in human history. But this is 1760. But the British did not allow factories to be built in America. They wanted a monopoly. Mm-hmm. And so when the revolution started, the second bill George Washington signed was a tariff bill on goods imported from England to make them more expensive so that we could afford to build factories on our own soil.
Yeah, buy America.
And we did.
Mm-hmm.
First factory was 1790, a cotton spinning mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. And then you had the first union of a bunch of shoe makers in Philadelphia. And the problem was that the tariffs helped the northern factories, but they didn't help the South because the South had to pay. They were agricultural. They had to pay for more stuff from Europe or more stuff, pay a higher price for the stuff from the northern factories. That animosity led up to the Civil War.
We're going to just pause right there. Bill Federer is with us here today on Crosstalk, and we're talking about the draw, the lure of socialism that is taking place. I mean, people are clamoring for, as Bill said, all this free stuff. Everything's going to be free. And even as coming from world agencies, you will own nothing and be happy. Somebody else has got to pay for this. Not me. It's got to be free. We'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY American Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, Noah's Ark explorer from the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, where did Noah build the ark?
Chris, we simply don't know where Noah lived nor where he built his boat. This is because the flood of Noah's day totally restructured the surface of the earth. There are no geographical remnants of that pre-flood world. Everything about that world is totally gone. Now, it is true that 2 of the 4 rivers named before the flood are the same names as today's rivers, but I suspect that Noah named these rivers like he did because they reminded him of the previous rivers. They couldn't have been the same because beneath these rivers are tens of thousands of feet of flood-deposited strata. They simply didn't exist before the flood. At least that's how I see it from a back to Genesis perspective.
Thanks, Dr. John. If you'd like to go back to Genesis, visit us on the web at www.icr.org. That's www.icr.org.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. William J. Federer, our guest today, a nationally known speaker. He is an historian, an author, president of AmeriSearch Incorporated, and has just put together a number of resources, one of which is the book on socialism. And that is dealing how the deep state capitalizes on crises to consolidate control. And Bill, many of the things we're going to get more into Labor Day and so forth, but many of the things we're talking about today, you have contained in this book, correct?
Right. The title of the book is Socialism, The Real History from Plato to the Present. And the listeners can get it through VCY America.
Yes, and we make it available, friends, our way of saying thank you for your support of $20 or more, and that does include postage to your home. If you'd like to obtain a copy, it's available at vcy.org, or by calling our switchboard 1-800-729-9829. That's 1-800-729-9829. Ask for a copy of the book Socialism. Friends, it's an eye-opener, and it will help you understand. I mean, because you go through the history of this, Bill, and helps us understand where we've come from the past, where this goes through the course of history in this world. And friends, so sadly, we're seeing this repeat itself over and over and over again. Right now, the Trump presidency is in rejection of this. We saw the Biden presidency just pushing this full thrust, and now we're seeing full thrust ahead in the city of New York City, and in other communities across the nation as well. So again, it's available 800-729-9829. Bill, we were talking about Labor Day, and well, actually, our overall topic, the lure of socialism, and you've explained about this matter of both fear and free stuff, and talking about now the connections between Labor Day and which we have coming up just a couple days from now, and its connection to socialism. So go ahead and pick up where you left off there.
Right. So Industrial Revolution, we had factories and we're producing stuff cheaper, and it's the fastest rise in the standard of living in human history. And it mostly freed women up. So instead of them weaving threads and cloth and sewing, you could buy fully made clothes, right? And also you had bridges and skyscrapers and steamboats and machinery and railroads. And now people could travel across the country very cheaply. And factory workers were largely immigrants, and they came over, worked for really cheap, learned a language, learned a skill. Grover Cleveland dedicated the Statue of Liberty, 1886, to welcome the immigrants. They came mostly from England, Ireland, Scandinavia, then Italians, Greeks, Poles, Russians, Jews, and Germans. Now, most of them worked hard, and it was called the Protestant work ethic. It was considered a social stigma to take a welfare handout. You had rags to riches stories. Horatio Alger was an author, and he wrote a series of stories about poor immigrants coming in, shining shoes on the streets of New York, and then becoming a clerk, and then working really hard and being honest, and then ended up being the owner of the store, right? But you also had Germans coming over infected with Karl Marx's theory of class struggle and redistribution of wealth. So Europe had centuries of wealth handed from generation to generation, and there was no upward mobility for the common people. America, in one lifetime, somebody could be innovative, work hard, and become successful. And so the socialist ideas in Europe really didn't have as much of a fertile ground here in America. But nevertheless, these socialist ideas were organizing unions. And the first union flyers were printed in German. So Chicago, you have Cyrus McCormick. He invented the mechanical reaper. He was a Presbyterian, and he thought that this would help fulfill a religious mission to feed the world. So instead of having to be out there, with your horse or with, by hand harvesting, you could do it quickly. McCormick donated $10,000 to Dwight L. Moody to build the Chicago YMCA. And he decides to hire people to work in his factories, but then there's an economic downturn, and they have the people get paid less, and they have a riot, the Haymarket riot, and some socialist threw a dynamite bomb at the police, killed 7, and so they built a statue to honor the policemen, but the incident took place on May 1st, around then, and so the union socialists decided to have May 1st be International Workers' Day. Then you have George Pullman started a railroad car company, and he wanted to have houses next to the factory so the workers wouldn't have to commute. He had shops next to the houses so the workers could have the food right there. And it was a perfect utopian community until an economic downturn, and orders for railroad cars dropped off, and so the wages were cut, and the workers didn't like that. And so a high school dropout named Eugene Debs organized a railroad strike. They destroyed $80 million worth of railroad cars in 27 states. New York Times called Debs a lawbreaker at large, enemy of the human race. It's called Debs Rebellion. Grover Cleveland sends out 12,000 Army troops to stop this destroying because it was stopping the delivery of U.S. mail. And Grover Cleveland's advisor, Francis Lynn Stetson, said, there's a midterm election coming up, and the people in the country are blaming the Democrats. We're going to lose. So Grover Cleveland wanted to appease the workers by giving them a day off and called it Labor Day.
Wow.
The workers wanted it on May 1st to coincide with this bloody Haymarket riot and the International Workers' Day, but Grover Cleveland said no, the first Monday in September. What happened to May 1st? Eisenhower signed a law making it Loyalty Day. What happened to the 1894 elections? Democrats had the biggest midterm loss in decades. What happened to Eugene Debs? He was arrested and put in jail for 6 months, where he read Karl Marx's Das Kapital. He gets out of prison, and he pushes for an income tax on the rich, and he founds the Socialist Democracy of America, 1897, Socialist Democratic Party of America, 1898, and the Socialist Party of America in 1901. He runs for president 5 times, 1900 to 1920, and Eugene Debs got 0 electoral votes, and so he began the movement to get rid of the Electoral College. World War I starts, and Eugene Debs urges resistance to the draft. And so one of the people following him was a draft dodger named Roger Baldwin, who founded the ACLU to defend socialist agitators. Roger Baldwin said, I am for socialism. I seek social ownership of property, abolition of the property class. Communism is the goal. Believe it or not, Eugene Debs influenced Vladimir Lenin.
Wow.
So Eugene Debs is doing what? In 1894, railroad strike. Well, here Vladimir Lenin, he wrote, look at America, apart from everything else, we have the beginnings of a split there too. Eugene Debs, the American rebel, declares in the socialist press that he recognizes only one type of war, civil war for the victory of socialism. Well, that inspired Lenin so that he did the Bolshevik Revolution, overthrew the Tsar, and killed 12 million people. And so Debs is running for president again, right? He did it 5 times. He's in Canton, Ohio, and he gives an anti-government speech, and he's arrested for sedition, put in jail for 10 years. His followers, the socialists, didn't like that, and so they have a May Day parade in Cleveland, Ohio that breaks out into the May Day riots of 1919, and they're trashing stuff.
Mostly peaceful protest, right?
Yeah. His attorney asked for a presidential pardon, and Woodrow Wilson writes denied across the paperwork, stating that during World War I, while the flower of American youth was pouring out its blood to vindicate the cause of civilization, this man, Debs, stood behind the line sniping and attacking and denouncing them. This man is a traitor to his country. He'll never be pardoned during my administration. The next president, Warren G. Harding, releases a statement. There is no question of his guilt. He is a dangerous man to mislead the unthinking. Theodore Roosevelt called Debs a undesirable citizen for his bloodshed, anarchy, and organizing riots. And Bernie Sanders produced a documentary praising Eugene Debs in 1979. Bernie Sanders hung a portrait of Eugene Debs in the City Hall in Burlington, Vermont. And Bernie Sanders dedicated a plaque to Eugene Debs in his congressional office.
Wow.
So Lenin, after killing 12 million people, he decides to take his socialist revolution global, and he starts the Communist Internationale in 1919. So the socialists in America followed suit, and they started the Communist Party USA. And the Communist Party USA ran candidates for president every year from 1924 to 1940. what happened in 1940? That's when the communists decided to support Franklin Roosevelt because of his New Deal programs during the Great Depression, and Roosevelt made a treaty with Joseph Stalin during World War II, and he's the head of the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. And so the communists decided to infiltrate the Democrat Party. Even Ronald Reagan said, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me.
Yeah, I remember.
You had former Democrat Senator Zell Miller, the last pro-life Democrat senator, and he said, unfortunately, the National Democratic Party has lost its way, and they've been taken over by the very liberal left-wing leaning special interest groups that you have in Washington. And the infiltration, a Democrat Congressman, Albert Herlong, read into the congressional record, January 10th, 1963, that the communist goal was to capture one or both of the political parties in the United States. And so those are the rhinos, right? So they're trying to get into the Republican Party. And but it even gets a little bit deeper. Do I have a few more minutes?
Yeah, we're 2 minutes before the break. Go on.
So that Haymarket riot, 1886, killed 7 police officers. Chicago built a statue to honor the police officers. But in 1969, the Weathermen Underground, a bunch of anarchists, blow up the statue during their days of rage. The Chicago rebuilds the statue, only to have the Weathermen Underground blow it up again in 1970.
Wow.
What happened to the Weathermen Underground? Well, it's this violent group led by Bill Ayers. And you know Bill Ayers because he hosted a fundraiser for Illinois State Senator Barack Obama.
Barack Obama, yep.
And Bill Ayers said, I am a radical leftist, small-c communist. Maybe I'm the last communist who's willing to admit it. The ethics of communism still appeal to me. I don't like Lenin as much as early Marx. Another Weathermen Underground member, Eric Mann, trained Patrice Cullors, founder of the Black Lives Matter.
Yep.
And Patrice Cullors said, myself and Alicia in particular, we're trained organizers. We're trained Marxists. We're super versed on ideological theories. So zoom out. American laborers work hard, get wages where they can buy things. Trucks, houses, cars, boats, guns, right? And if you want, you can give away some of your possessions in charity. In socialist countries, laborers work hard, but they have no possessions. The state owns them and owns everything. And if you don't own anything, how can you be charitable? How can you fulfill the Bible command? Karl Marx wrote in the Communist Manifesto, the theory of communism is summed up in one sentence, abolition of private property. So you don't have any private property.
You know, Bill, I'm going to continue there, but because we're 15 seconds from the break, I'm just going to interject. And that's what Mamdani is also promoting, you know, is the abolition of private property. We have them denouncing private property. That is a tenet of socialism, is it not? Right.
So it's one of those hooks dangling in the water. It all sounds great, free stuff, free stuff, free stuff, but the government will end up owning you.
Friends, we're going to take a quick break, and I'm going to have Bill take us continue down this road of this history lesson we need to learn about socialism, because it has a draw, it has a hook in it, and people are succumbing to this, and we have to understand what its goal is. Where is socialism leading us as a nation? We'll be back in a minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America.
The Watchtower Society claims to be God's only channel on earth.
Because Jehovah's Witnesses believe the Word of God is channeled to humanity through this elite committee alone, these men...
But is the Watchtower Society's translation of the Bible accurate and unbiased? Are its predictions for the future reliable? Are its followers content with their lives and leaders? Is there truth to what they teach? The Watchtower says yes to each of those questions. In the booklet, The Facts on Jehovah's Witnesses, you'll find well-documented answers and insights that reveal the error of their teachings. You'll learn what they believe about the Trinity, about Jesus, about salvation, about their mistranslation of the Scriptures, and about their many failed prophecies. The handy-sized booklet, The Facts on Jehovah's Witnesses. Available for a donation of $9 when you call 1-800-729-9829.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America, and again, my eyes were turned to an article talking about the New York City's mayor's race and the huge point spread that is between the candidates they're running for office, and talking about the Gen Zers in particular are really drawn into this matter of socialism. And so I asked Bill to come on the program and tell us about this, help us understand the background. What is the draw of socialism? And friends, he's giving us a very fast history here. He has put so much information in his book on socialism, the real history from Plato to the present. We have copies of the book. We're making this available. Our way of saying thank you for your support of $20 or more to Crosstalk. We'll send you a copy of the book that does include the shipping to you. Reach out to us here at either vcy.org, or you may call our switchboard at 1-800-729-9829, 1-800-729-9829. And there is so much material in this book, over just about it's about 275 pages. And you'll go through the communist goals. You'll go through so many different issues in this book as well. Socialism, again, you can reach out by calling 800-729-9829. So we're talking about the history here, the lure that has drawn so many people in, U.S. presidents that have fallen hook, line, and sinker in dangling out this bait to the American people. And we see this happening over and over again, depending on who's in the administration, or as we are seeing right now in New York City as well as in some other cities. But Bill, you were telling us here about the connection to Labor Day, and just going to have you pick up where you left off.
Right. So the situation is Karl Marx. He's the one that said socialism is a transition phase from capitalism to communism. And communism is summed up in a single sentence: abolition of private property. And so they think that when the entire world, all private property is eradicated in the entire world, then socialism will finally be fulfilled and you will have communism and everybody's going to be happy. Unfortunately, what happens is you have gangs, and the gangs in power want to stay in power, and they weaponize it against those that challenge their power, and you basically turn into a dictatorship. The word communism comes from the word communis, it's Latin, where everything's held in common. And so there's no private property, there's no privacy, all the way back to Plato. There's not even control of your own children. The state claims to own your own children. It's the control of the production side and the consumption side. And so not only will they control all the businesses, they'll control your ability to buy stuff. People are familiar with John Lennon and his wife Yoko Ono. And in 1971, their song Imagine. And it says, imagine no possessions and no religion too.
Wow.
No possessions. Gee, that sounds like Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum. Mm-hmm. You'll own nothing and be happy.
Yep.
You'll own nothing, no possessions. Now, the word socialism is the opposite of individualism. So it was invented by Henry de Saint-Simon. Henry de Saint-Simon, he's a French political philosopher who lived 1760 to 1825. So he invented this word socialism as a counter to individual. And Karl Marx, Frederick Engels, Leon Trotsky, Antonio Gramsci all pick up on this, and they begin to use this word socialism. Capitalism, interestingly enough, comes in two flavors. Individual capitalism means you get to start a business and sell stuff to a customer, and you don't need the government looking over your shoulder. But then when you get to global capitalism, it's different, because global capitalists are happy to work with communist countries that use slave labor, and they want to get the government to give them favorable terms and squelch all competition. And they're patriotic to their money. They're not patriotic to a country. So we want to make the distinction between local patriotic capitalism of the individual having the freedom to make money versus globalist capitalism. And now, socialism, since it's based on the community being the ultimate, it wants to get rid of belief systems that highlight the individual, like Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
So the Bible says that you have a worth and an identity apart from any group. That you have a worth because you individually are made in the image of God, and God is not a respecter of persons, so every individual is equal to every other individual. Socialism says your worth is dependent on your belonging to a group. And so whenever socialism comes into a country, they get people to stop being patriotic and identify with subgroups, sexual groups, racial groups, economic groups, religious groups, and then they pit the groups against each other, and it causes internal division, and in the confusion, people want the government to restore order, and then they give up their freedoms in the process. But in winding this up, I do want to acknowledge that unions did help end child labor. That's a good thing. They did bring about an 8-hour workday. That's a good thing. A 40-hour work week, minimum wages, safer working conditions, more benefits. Those are all good things, but they come at a price. The company now has more expenses in the labor column, and so what do the companies want to do? Lower expenses. And so the first big company is Henry Ford's motor company in Detroit. Henry Ford is traveling the world looking for another source of rubber, and he's over in the Middle East, and a Yemeni Muslim helps put his luggage on a boat. And he sees him working hard and says, hey, if you show up at my factory in Detroit, I'll give you $5 a day. Well, word spreads, and the Yemeni and the Middle Eastern Muslims start showing up in Detroit. And Henry Ford looks at them as a way to break the unions. The unions are anti-immigrant. And so he's like, hey, so the ArabAmerica.com website, September 5th, 2020, says the origin story of how the Yemeni Muslim community in Michigan is an interesting one. Way back in the early 1900s, Henry Ford started recruiting Yemeni workers to work at his Ford factories. After a few years, Ford sent for more workers, and the Yemeni American community began to grow. People who gained citizenship during their time at the Ford factory brought their families over and started lives in Michigan while remaining close to their family back in Yemen.
Wow.
And so Henry Ford, so we look at, in Dearborn and Hamtramck, Michigan, they have taken over the entire city council. They have their Muslim sheriff, and just today I read about some guy didn't like the Hate America parades in the street, Death to America, and he posted something on Facebook. The Hamtramck police come to his house and arrest him for hate crime. And this is in America, just for doing a post. So, second, businesses want to lower prices. And so they begin to do more automation, right? So the machines do it, not people. And the third is outsourcing. And so after World War II, you have Americans helping Germany and Japan build new factories. And while the people in America are using old factories, and then these new factories produce stuff cheaper, and with their profits, they lobby politicians in America to lower the tariffs so they can bring their foreign-made goods into America cheaper and put out of business the American factories. And so more American factories would shut down and go overseas. Why? Because they can have lower wages, less taxes, less lawsuits in other countries, less regulations, less environmental restrictions. And then there's what's called crony capitalism. And we see that the businesses that would support a particular administration would get benefits, and those that didn't were not. And so those, over the past decade, you'd have more outsourcing. Trump's trying to reverse that. Trump is saying, look, let's put tariffs, taxes on foreign-produced items intentionally to make them more expensive so that people will buy fewer of them. And these businesses will have a motivation to what? Move their factory back to America and bring jobs back with them. So Trump's trying to reverse this situation. But we see that there are good things, right? Better working conditions, but the bad things was that causing the jobs to leave the country. But there's this union membership in America has declined from a high of 35% in 1954 to less than 10%. And Alexander Solzhenitsyn, he was in a socialist country. He spent 11 years in a Soviet labor camp. And he gave a warning. He says, I call upon America to be more careful with its trust. Prevent those who are attempting to establish ever finer legal shades of equality to the short-sighted self-interest. Beware of those falsely using the struggle for social justice to lead you down a false road. They're trying to weaken you. They're trying to disarm your strong and magnificent country. I call upon you, ordinary working men of America, do not let yourselves become weak.
Wow.
And now on the flip side, America was unique in that you could start businesses. And Booker T. Washington, he was born a slave. He is the first black president of a university, Tuskegee. He founds the National Negro Business League in the year 1900. This is 10 years before the U.S. Chamber of Commerce was started. And Booker T. Washington was like, I don't want you to just get a job. I want you to create jobs. He says anyone can seek a job, but it requires a person of rare ability to create a job. What we should do in our schools is to turn out fewer job seekers and more job creators. And so he said the best way to lift yourself up is to lift up somebody else. And so he was pushing for this individual creativity. And Reagan, 1988, said, I believe we really can say that God did give mankind virtually unlimited gifts to invent, produce, and create. And for that reason alone, it would be wrong for governments to devise a tax structure or an economic system that suppresses and denies those gifts. So in other words, instead of this closed-minded, if you take a bigger piece of the pie, you're taking away from me, it's a different mindset. It's cook another pie, bake another pie, right? You have freedom. God can give you innovative ideas. You work hard, and you can turn those ideas into reality. You can do that in America. You cannot do that in a socialist communist country. I talked to somebody recently from the Netherlands. He says there's 75% taxes. And he says that the local taxes, this tax, that tax, all these taxes, it's almost impossible to start a business. But in America, you can.
You know, friends, this history is so important for us to grasp hold of as we see where socialism leads a nation, and we're on the brink of this in some major U.S. cities as well. Bill Fitter is with us today. We're talking about the draw of socialism. Our phone number to Crosstalk, and maybe you've got a question about what Bill has stated here or a brief comment. Our number is 800-733-9829. That's 800-733-9829. 9829. A quick break. We'll come back to your calls and also information on how you can obtain a copy of his book. If you haven't already, his book entitled Socialism, The Real History from Plato to the Present. It's so important for us to have this understanding as we see the draw of socialism, and especially with what's happening with Gen Zers in our nation here today, who want to have that experience, want all this free stuff. And, friends, it leads to great detriment. We'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website's worldviewtube.com. Recently from the Oval Office, President Trump announced and then signed an executive order where he wants to make it a year in jail for burning an American flag in the process of inciting a riot. Well, the courts have ruled on this, so we'll see where it goes. But I opened up the phone lines on my radio broadcast to see what Americans thought. I admitted up front, I am very conflicted. I do not like to see our flag burned, spit upon, or desecrated in any way. It bothers me deeply. But I also believe that we have to be careful when it comes to doing anything that abridges on First Amendment rights. Would it be a crime to burn the LGBTQ flag? Could you go to jail for that? Or the Quran? You see, the issue is we have to be careful, folks, as wise as serpents and as gentle as doves, not to fall into a trap. Because you can say, well, we want to prosecute people that don't agree with the Holocaust. Wait a minute, do you really want to do that? That's a double-edged sword. Let's be wise.
William J. Federer is our guest on Crosstalk today. We're talking about the draw of socialism. And friends, I think it was last week we played a clip from Mamdani on his promotion of the abolition of private property, the very thing Bill warned about here on the program. We have millionaires that are backing his campaign right now. Very interesting. That's a headline from townhall.com. $1 Million Marxism. Mamdani's socialist campaign backed by the millionaires that he wants to ban. A very interesting paradox going on there. Friends, you're listening to Crosstalk, and if you'd like to obtain Bill's book, Socialism, The Real History from Plato to the Present, it is available, our way of saying thank you for your support of $20 or more. You can just reach out to our switchboard at 800-729-9829. That's 800-729-9829, or by going to vcy.org. That's vcy.org, and we will be glad to help you with that, get that book to you. Our lines are packed here for Crosstalk today. We're going to begin with Rod in Wisconsin Rapids, and Rod, you're on the air.
Well, thank you for taking my call. One question that I always have for anyone that's in favor.
Go ahead, Rod. Okay, it looks like Rod got in a bad cell zone or something of that nature, so we didn't hear the question that he has. But I think it's very interesting with Mamdani that they're talking about, they're calling him a capitalist with a small c. I think that's an interesting phrase, Bill.
Yeah, so the idea is you lie to people to get in power, and then once you're in power, you forget all the things you promised. So the people that think, hey, if I give him money, even if he gets in power, he'll go nice on me. Mm-hmm. Like maybe for a short time, but it doesn't work. It's like certain areas where Christians say, well, let's help a particular Muslim get in power, but often when they do get in power, they put their friends in power, and those friends may not be as tolerant as the Christians had hoped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so very interesting, friends. Again, our number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829, Bill Federer. And again, the number to obtain the book is through our main switchboard, which is 800-729-9829. That's 800-729-9829. We're going to go to line number 4, and caller, your name and where you're calling from.
George, Olney, Illinois.
Yeah, and your question or comment.
I'm 70 years old, and they used to teach that in school, and that America was a great experiment because it had never really been done before. And each man, just like Jesus said, is given a talent or 5 talents, and we're supposed to go forth and do something with it. And we are responsible for for our results.
Yeah, indeed.
And we will answer to the Lord.
Thank you, George, for raising that issue. And Bill, you have interviewed on Crosstalk on that very issue here before as well, and just looking at the history of the United States and our birth as a nation. But we do have an accountability for what we do with these resources, do we not?
Yeah. I've spoken in Olney before. It was the home of the white squirrels. Believe it or not, they're completely white squirrels there in Olney, Illinois.
I've seen them.
So you have a video years ago where they had a starting line, and they're going to have like a race, right? And then they would say, now, if you're from somebody that's from a white home, you get to take 10 steps forward. And if you're somebody where you have a mom and a dad, you're extra special. You get to take another 10 steps forward. And if you're from a wealthier community, then you take that. And of course, the camera's looking at the faces of the people that are still on the starting line. And they're like, this isn't fair. And they're trying to push this DEI. One of the things that it leaves out is, what's the finish line? What's the finish line?
Yeah.
Is the finish line, how much stuff can I accumulate until I die and then I leave it behind to somebody else? Mm-hmm. No, the finish line is standing before God. And God gives 1 talent to one person, 2 talents to another, 5 talents to another, and then God says, what are you going to do to help people with what I've given you? And so to whom much is given, much is required. If you're and we're all different. Some people have gifts with music. Some people have gifts with athletics. It's like we have different gifts. What do you do with your gifts is what counts.
Yeah. Scripture says, moreover, it's required of stewards. A man be found faithful. Be faithful with that stewardship. Jerry in Whitewater, you're on the air.
Yeah, if these young people think socialism is so wonderful. They need to go over and live in China for a few weeks or a month.
Yeah.
Wouldn't take any more than that, and they'll realize how wonderful socialism isn't, because you will lose your freedom. You become a slave, and the government controls you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jerry. Good point, sir, Bill.
They have cameras all around the country with facial recognition, and they track you everywhere you go. They're clamping down on everything that you post on the internet. There's no freedom.
Let's go to Alice.
We don't want to go in that direction.
Alice in Roswell, New Mexico. You're on the air.
Hello. I wanted to say first, I really enjoy Bill Federer's history in the accounts that he brings to the show.
Yes.
What I wanted to add was in regards to that Democrat mayoral race in New York City.
Yeah.
The news reports said that white liberals accounted for much of that vote in getting him ahead of Cuomo, and they said that he, in addition to free stuff, he advocated abortion and transgender, affirming care for people. So he's trying to get them all in to vote for him in that regard.
Yeah. Thank you for raising that. And Bill, that's part of the strategy as well.
Right. They make promises to all these groups, but then when they get in, they forget all the promises.
Yeah.
And they just push their agenda.
Thank you. Let's see. Next is Tony in Neillsville, Wisconsin. You're on the air.
I just have, since the clock's just about ran out, one comment, and that was taken back to 1988 when Bob Hope was still alive yet, and he did those infomercials about urging Americans to buy America because it matters, folks.
Yeah.
And I appreciate Bill's history, and now I know how all the Muslims started coming to Michigan because of the Ford Motor Company.
Isn't that something? A history lesson for all of us. Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, to break the unions.
We're out of time. We could go on another hour, and we're sorry for other callers online here that we're not able to get to your calls. Bill, thank you so much for being with us today to address this topic on the lure and the draw of socialism.
Well, it's all in the book, Socialism, the Real History from Plato to the Present, that the listeners can get through VCY.
And friends, you can do so at vcy.org or by calling us at 800-729-9829. Our way of saying thank you for your support of $20 or more. Bill, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Jim.
And God bless you, friends. Thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.